Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. Joining myself and Henry today, with Michael McCubbin away on holiday, is Patrick Van Straten. Welcome back to the show, Pat.
Thank you, thanks for having me.
How are you? Are you enjoying the start of the transfer window? It's been busy down Arsenal way.
I liked how you made clear that the only reason I'm here is because McCubbin was not available.
Otherwise, you would not be invited.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah, I am enjoying it insofar as I don't have to watch football at the moment, which I find to be enjoyable at this time of year. And I get to see everyone lose their minds in our group chat. Our group chat this week, given that nothing's happening, has been incredibly punchy.
It's always quite lively.
Yes, that's quite fun.
Nice. Henry, feels like there's a few centre-backs leaving Fulham. Is that the main talking point at Fulham at the moment?
Wow.
Tosin Adarabioyo. Yeah, I don't know if he thinks that he's going to get a much better move. I was reading that maybe Tottenham, and they were saying, yeah, he could be a good rotation option in the Tottenham side. Like, I'm kind of sad that Tosin wants to leave. He's a good player. I don't know if he's levels above Fulham, in all honesty. But if he gets a bumper move to a better team, fair enough. I'm slightly worried about Fulham next year, not going to lie. I think we're going to have a difficult old time.
Yeah, especially if you're losing
Top
João
six.
Palhinha as well. Although £90 million
not gonna happen.
is what you're asking for.
Literally, Fulham we don't have to sell him.
No.
We're not going to sell him. There's no way. And I think they can easily just watch West Ham playing hardball with Declan Rice and just go, well, we know how much money you're going to have. Give it to us.
Fair. Well, if anyone cares, Sunderland have signed 3 players, including Nectarios Triantis, an Australian centre-back, who's got an amazing name. But Continental Club today is going to be about players that clubs need to sell from around Europe. We are doing their business for them. Obviously, a lot of European clubs don't have that much money this summer, as usual. So these are some assets they could get rid of. Henry, the first one came in from Salmonfish 2000, great name. And he suggested Sandro Tonali. Now, you know, do Milan have to sell him for financial reasons? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, there's sort of two sides to this. First off, really good player, Sandro Tonali. I like the fact that this is the profile of player that Newcastle are going after. We saw them linked to Barella. That seemed almost too good to be true, in all honesty. And it sounds like Inter Milan have balked at the suggestion that he go for £50 million. I think Sandro Tonali, for the reported £45-50 million fee, that would be a pretty fair price for a good player, in my opinion. I mean, in other summers, with more interest and more money in the market, I think maybe they could get more for him, in all honesty. But right now, I really like that. And it's easy to see why you'd want a player like Tonali. 10 assists in all competitions last season. When he was coming through at Brescia, he was kind of misprofiled as the Andrea Pirlo. That was basically just because he had long hair. It wasn't really the way that he played at all. Although he is good at spreading balls from deep. He's got a great long pass on him. Great set piece specialist. So he's got that in his tank too. But really, he's just very good, very confident on the ball, breaking the lines. He's got great key pass numbers, which I think is really good. If that's what Newcastle are looking to do. I actually didn't think this was the kind of player they wanted. I thought they wanted someone a bit more defensive than Tonali. I don't think defence has been his all-out selling point as a player, but he has a lot of as captain of the Italian under-21s. I think he's got good leadership qualities. 14 caps for Italy too. I think he's captaining Italy at the under-21s,
despite being 23.
Yeah, I
don't like that.
I'd have thought he's played enough football this year. I thought they'd have left him alone. But yeah, and from AC Milan's perspective, to have bought him for €15 million, which was a bit of a coup at the time, to flip him a few years later for over triple that, is pretty impressive, I would say. Now, the question of whether Milan need to sell, financially, no, because I remember writing about this for the Explained. They got about €80 million just for getting to the semi-finals of the Champions League. That is a serious wad of cash, and it essentially writ off their losses from the season before, put them in the green for the year. And then, of course, Juventus get this points deduction, and Milan get put back in the Champions League for next season, which is another bumper sort of source of income. So they don't actually have to sell their good players. That still doesn't mean they've got loads of money to spend in the market. And this is probably where the Maldini-Massaro rupture happened. We saw he wanted more money. He wants the owners to go out and spend now. They're being a bit more tentative. I was reading online, obviously tell me if I'm wrong, it was saying they've roughly got a £50 million budget to spend. And that could be more. And the thing about Milan in the past is they have been super bad at selling their players. They have been bad. I mean, we look at the list of players that they've let go for free. Çalhanoğlu, Kessié, Donnarumma, Romagnoli, Bonaventura. That's lots. I'm not saying that they were going to maximise the amount of money they could get out of these players. But that's a serious wedge of cash that could have gone into the Milan coffers to go into new players, to build a better team for the future. So I think if you're looking at the opportunity to sell Tonali, someone who I do think could be replaced. I've heard about David Fratesi at Sassuolo. They're looking at him. He's come out and said that he's not ready to move abroad out of Italy. He wants to stay in Italy. Inter are trying to put together a deal for him, but don't have the sort of the green light for the finances to do that. Milan could go in and get a young sort of 21-year-old talent. Also seen them linked with Sergei Milinkovic-Savic, which we'll talk about later. And there's that Ruben Loftus-Cheek rumour, which I don't mind as well. Ruben Loftus-Cheek gives a bit more drive in the midfield. Milan are an attractive proposition, and they will be able to buy players at around the £30 million price point, but they need a bigger budget to go out and really transform the squad. If the opportunity is there to make good money on Tonali, I think the emphasis is, why not take it? They've done well to tie down Leao to a new deal. That's their main asset, let's be honest, but I don't think they should be afraid at being a selling club if the opportunity presents itself for them to take a bit of money and go and reinvest. So they don't have to sell, but this isn't the worst idea in the world to move Tonali on and get another player in of a similar profile.
Interesting. Very nuanced argument, that, Henry. I enjoyed that. I think the interesting thing is now with Milan, if they lose Tonali, they've also lost Brahim Diaz. He's gone back to Real Madrid. Feels like two sort of key members of that side from last year would be leaving at the worst possible time. I mean, Pat, from a Newcastle perspective, do you kind of agree with Henry that he's not that out-and-out defensive midfielder, and they potentially have those box-to-box players in Joe Linton and Joe Willock? Do they need a Sandro Tonali?
I don't know. I mean, he offers something different, certainly. Right now, I'd say their progressive passing pretty much runs through two guys, which is Bruno Guimaraes and Trippier. And having more players who are capable of passing the ball forward is a good thing. As much as we like Joe Linton, as much as we like Joe Willock, these guys are not particularly, ball secure. They're not high touch midfielders. So having another guy who can get on the ball and dictate kind of works. What I would say is that if a team was looking at Barella and Tonali, we would probably say this team doesn't really know what they want. But actually, I think in Newcastle's case, because of Bruno's flexibility, it does kind of make sense. And I think his defensive output is so huge that I'm kind of philosophical about Tonali's shortcomings in that area. He is still young. He can still improve. He can still bulk up. And there's enough there, I think, to take a risk on him. But it is a little bit of a risk. It's not like 45 million that guarantees your team will be better next year. It'll be deeper for sure. But they've made their name so far on a really, hard-running, high-pressing system, which essentially gums up the midfield. The question will be whether Tonali can be a part of that, because it's certainly not how he's perceived in Italy. He's perceived as a little bit more of a kind of like floaty luxury type player than that. So it'll be interesting what this means for Newcastle's evolution if they do get this signing over.
Yeah, they've also nailed all their big money signings so far, whereas I think Barella, I totally agree with you, is a different calibre of player to Tonali at the moment, and potentially in the future as well.
Have nailed all their big money.
Sorry, Newcastle have as well. With Gordon. Isak, Bruno Guimaraes, less so Gordon, to be fair. You've caught me out there, but Sven Botman. I mean, the majority of them have gone pretty well in that younger bracket. So I'd worry about Tonali slightly. I'm not sure he's totally worth that. And I also saw some quotes the other day about him talking about his love for Milan as well. And the guy's absolutely obsessed with Milan ever since he was a youngster. So I think it'd be very difficult to get him as well. Pat, let's move on to Barcelona, because FCB MB10 said Ferran Torres, Cooler HD said Eric Garcia. It feels like, as ever with Barcelona at the moment, they do need to sell some players this summer. And these are two good options, do you think?
They're two obvious options, but actually there are quite a lot of obvious options in this squad. Every kind of few months there's an article out of the Barcelona paper saying these are the untouchable players. These are the players we will not sell, and it's always about 6 guys, which leaves about 20 that you would presumably sell. Look, Barca do need to sell some guys. I think they only registered Xavi for the new season yesterday. Yes. They've had to present a financial viability plan to La Liga in order to be able to sign and register players. So they do need to trim in pretty much all areas. And I think an obvious place is kind of Ferran Torres. I think he's a good player. 1,400 minutes last season, 6 goals and assists, which is a little bit disappointing, but his expected goal numbers are better. About 0.5 XG per game, though that's still only 5th in the squad. So it's not like, wow, we have to keep this guy. There are people like, Rafinha and Dembele and obviously Lewandowski ahead of him. But he was brought in to be... Everybody said, well, he can play through the middle and he can play on the wing, so therefore, you're always going to be able to get him on the field. And he made 14 starts last season. He's made 31 starts in 2 years for Barcelona. It's a little bit disappointing. And given that he's 23, he's obviously played in the UK, he plays for the national team, he's one of your more saleable assets. He's one of the guys who has a high profile.
They did buy him for big money, though.
They did. And because they're amortizing that fee and because of what they pay him in wages, though his wages aren't that crazy, they're losing about 15 million euros a year on him.
Wow.
Well, from that point of view, I think it absolutely makes sense to try and move him on if you're not going to play him, even though I think having a 23-year-old Spaniard at the club is the kind of thing that Barcelona should actually be trying to do. But clearly, you prioritise Xavi, you prioritise Pedri. I think that there are rumours that Aston Villa might be interested. There are rumours actually that a few Premier League teams could be interested. If you can get sort of 40 mil for him, which feels like it should be gettable for a player of his quality, I think Barcelona have to do that. They've got relatively few of these guys who can fetch a fee that big and who have interest. And as much as, Barcelona fans will lecture you on Twitter about, oh, we're going to sell Kessié for 30 mil, we're going to sell like this guy for 20 mil. They don't have that many players who people want. They really don't. That said, Kessié may well leave. Rumoured to be kind of in talks with Inter Milan, and obviously that would be free money. Like, that's not the worst thing in the world. Eric Garcia is a more difficult case because I forgot how young he is. He's only just 22.
Does have some good attributes as well.
Yeah,
he's always his passing numbers always really pop.
He's
a very good long range.
He has
passer.
a very good attribute,
yeah,
which is like he can pass.
Not a brilliant defender.
Yeah, and I think that would only be exacerbated in other leagues. I think in Spain, his aerial win rate is horrible. It's about 50%. So it's the worst among all Barcelona defenders. He makes more tackles and interceptions than the rest of the Barcelona defenders, but he's got a lower tackle success rate than all of them. His passing is good. I mean, he's the top 1% for progressive passes, top 4% for progressive carries as a centre-back. But I don't know. I mean, maybe in the next 2-3 years he will learn to defend. But right now he kind of feels like a guy who has a lot more value for a team which just has the ball all the time. And those teams are elite. They can afford to get a guy who can do all the stuff he could do, plus some other things. Like, to me, if I were going to sell Eric Garcia, I'd sort of be like, Ajax? Would Ajax like this guy to replace Jurrien Timber? Real high passing. I don't think his defending would probably be as much of an issue in the Eredivisie, as harsh as that might be to say. So that's the kind of move that I think is possible. Either that or it's a drop down the Spanish league, or maybe to a mid-table German club or something, though I think he'd be horrible in the Bundesliga. So I think so the problem that you've got there is all the clubs we're talking about, probably 15 mil, maybe 20 million euros is your max. But that's still better than nothing. 1,400 minutes last season, but 3 centre-backs ahead of him, and they want more centre-backs. They always want more centre-backs. I don't really see Eric Garcia ever making a name as like a Barcelona regular. I think at best it'll be like, oh Jesus, somebody's injured, we've got to play Garcia today, which is not the situation that you'd want to be in.
It's quite a depressing career, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and but actually, I mean, what's going on at Barca is really weird because, like, on the list of touchable players, if you'll pardon the phrasing, guys like Rafinha. Apparently they would listen to offers for Rafinha, though I imagine they would only listen to ludicrous offers for Rafinha. But Ansu Fati, apparently as well. And Ansu Fati, most minutes ever in a league season last year, 1,400 minutes, 10 goals and assists.
Always good when he played, yeah.
Yeah, but the season before that, it was like triple figures for minutes. The season before that, triple figures for minutes. Like, he's barely he's basically got about a full season of minutes across 4 years in the Barcelona first team. And as talented as he is, again, Xavi and Pedri are ahead of him in the order, and Lewandowski obviously is going to play up front. So now you look at Ansu Fati, and again, you're Barcelona. If somebody's going to offer you maybe, God, I don't know, 60 mil,
yeah,
then you'd say we will we will have to take that. Like, there's no way around it.
Yeah, the thing is just his star is quite low at the moment, Ansu Fati, just because of those injury issues and his limited minutes. I mean, the big talk a couple of months ago was Wolves, but I haven't really seen any chat about that. I didn't actually realise until the other day that Adama Traore has left Wolves and he's a free agent, and there's absolutely no chat about him either.
I wouldn't be shocked if Fati went on like a loan to Sevilla, because his dad was talking it up. It's where they moved to, wasn't it? Where they moved to Sevilla. Obviously back in the Champions League now, so it suddenly becomes quite an attractive proposition. I wouldn't be, if they were looking to like try and get his wages off the books for a year. I think actually not a bad move for Fati at this point.
I love it. That sounds like a Henry Hill scoop. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Henry Hill seal of approval. Right, let's move on to Bayern Munich and some of their outgoings or potential outgoings, including Ryan Gravenberch, that came in from Ben Flyde, and Cecil Tekem and Defoe's suggestion of Luca Hernandez. Now, Bayern's situation is a little bit interesting this summer because their hierarchy has completely changed on the final day of the season. They basically fired Oliver Kahn at half-time, which was pretty mental.
That is funny.
It was pretty crazy, despite the fact they did eventually get over the line in the Bundesliga, and it feels like a lot of their players that they're targeting so far this summer, they're having difficulty in getting them over the line. Jurrien Timber feels like he's closer to Arsenal than Bayern Munich. Of course, this might change by tomorrow and the time this video goes live. Declan Rice looks like he's chosen Arsenal or a Premier League move over Bayern Munich. They have seemingly got Kim Min-jae through the door, and that kind of clears the way for Luca Hernandez to leave. I saw a lot of very angry people replying to my tweet suggesting Luca Hernandez, calling him a traitor, etc., because Bayern have really stuck by him through a lot of injury issues. Like, this guy's missed 60 games in 4 years.
Like, what does that mean, though? They stuck by him? What, as in, like, they had him contracted?
Well, he was contracted to play, but Amazing. I do get their point in that as soon as he's back fit, he has been offered money from PSG and is jumping at the chance to go there. Obviously, he's French. It makes sense for him. He can cover on the left-hand side for PSG. I actually think it's quite a good signing for PSG. Yeah. But I can understand, for Bayern's record signing, has he shown enough? You know, there's no loyalty in football, but could he have stuck around longer at Bayern? I can understand Bayern fans' frustration, let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, I get where you're coming from, but they're signing Kim Min-jae. He's going to be going in there expecting to be a starter. If you look at the salary that he's coming in on and the bonuses and what's been paid out, according to reports, it's quite something. So, and then he's not going to be ahead of De Ligt, and I think he's just not as reliable injury-wise as Upamecano, certainly a centre-half. And we've seen that Pavard wants to play centre-half too. So really, look at Hernandez. If they can get Kyle Walker through the door too, there's not actually tons of space for him in a squad, considering that he's not shown enough really to justify being there in the first place. He is a great defender on his day, but I don't know why you'd call him a traitor. I think this is a win-win for Bayern Munich.
Yeah, I think personally I wasn't. I was just repeating what they were saying in the comments.
As in, you out there calling him a traitor. Yeah, I think this is an absolute win for Bayern Munich. Okay, look, every team's going to have a big money flop on their books. Bayern have been pretty good so far in avoiding that. Just take this one on the chin, take what money you can get, and get the wages back on.
I suppose, especially if it's going to be about 50 million euros. What's that? A 30 million euro loss. At times when he's been...
Is that what they're saying? 50 million to PSG?
I think it's around that.
That's great.
That's great.
Well, exactly.
They've been trying to sell him for ages. What are they talking about? Yeah, and if this allows them to get him Kim, where I feel like the X factor maybe in those numbers is the fact that Kim is a really, really good player who is also Korean, which I think is like a huge advantage for Bayern. Bayern have been talking over the last decade about wanting to grow their profile to rival the big Spanish sides and the big English sides. And so a great way for them to do that is to have like a world-class Korean player, which allows them to expand in Korea, where there's like a huge football market. So I wonder if that's maybe part of their thinking with what looked like pretty crazy numbers to get that deal done.
Yeah, I also think Upamecano's performances against Man City in the Champions League might play a small role in that as well. I'm not saying he's done at the top level, but he did have a shocking tie.
Just on Bayern Munich, a lot of the comments were saying Goretzka as well. A lot of the comments were saying that he's the midfielder they should be looking to move on. Because I remember we discussed Kimmich a few weeks back, and everyone's saying, oh, no, it's Goretzka, he should go. And there is a point there. He's the 7th highest earner in the squad. He's on massive, massive wages. And Kimmich is capable of doing the kind of things that he's capable of doing in the final third. I think Kimmich is probably a more technical creator in many ways. I like Goretzka a lot. They brought in Konrad Laimer, so they've got in a more of a defensive option in front of the defence. That was the logic behind getting Rice in, was they were going to balance the midfield and actually provide more security in front of the back line. So that you're looking at that, and suddenly Goretzka looks like the odd one out. So if you could get some money for him, I think that'd be a pretty smart decision.
Oh, I don't know. I really like Goretzka. I think he's a useful player to have around the squad and has had some exceptional seasons at Bayern. Even last year, I don't think he was as bad as people make out. The player that I think definitely needs to confirm what sort of game time he's getting next season is who suggested it again? Ben Flyde's suggestion of Ryan Gravenberch. The guy played 33 games last year in his first year at Bavaria. That sounds great on the surface, but 9 of them were for 10 minutes or less. He only played more than 45 minutes once in the Bundesliga. This is a guy who was being called, well, he was named Eredivisie Young Player of the year before. He was being called, the next big thing in Dutch football at Ajax, and he didn't really get a look in under 2 managers. I mean, Tuchel slightly improved his minutes towards the end of the season, but even then, not a lot. And he recently said, I want to play more, preferably at Bayern, otherwise at a club where I'll 100% play. That's my plan. And he's very good at a number of things. He's got reasonable defensive output, and he's very good at drifting into attacking areas and receiving the ball in dangerous spaces. They do call him the Dutch Pogba, which I think is probably quite a lazy comparison, but they do have a similar build at least. And they do have a similar, flair in tight spaces as well. I really like Ryan Gravenberch, and he's been linked with Liverpool at the moment, potentially on loan. I think that'd be a really sensible move for him. But having said that, the opportunity to play at Bayern doesn't come around all that often. And do you want to throw it away after 1 year when there's so much potential upheaval in the middle of the park as well? It's a difficult one for him to answer. But he wouldn't be the only midfielder that's struggled against the competition of Goretzka and Kimmich in recent years, like Mark Rocker going to Leeds, Sabitzer taking a low move to Man United. I mean, to a far lesser extent, Thiago leaving to go play for Liverpool. He obviously saw that as a good opportunity to further his career as well. But yeah, I think Ryan Gravenberch would be a really smart pickup for a number of Premier League sides. The only thing is, it'd be the fee. Bayern, I think, only spent 18 million euros on him. They probably want that and a little bit more probably back. That seems like a pretty good deal. But we'll see what happens with Ryan Gravenberch and those Bayern outgoings. These guys very, very hot on selling Luke Hernandez. I think it's a bit of a shame. 80 million euros hasn't really worked out. Yeah, I'd rather see him stick around for a bit longer. Let's talk about Kylian Mbappe at the suggestion of Foz Wrestle. I mean, Pat, this is the big talking point throughout this entire summer. Do PSG have to sell Mbappe? Where do you sit on this? Because obviously he is probably the most valuable player in the world. He says he doesn't want to extend his deal. Is it time to get some money for him?
Maybe. I mean, I don't really know what the next iteration of PSG would look like if they were to let Mbappe go. But Mbappe, it's fairly clear at this point, is going to run down contracts. He's going to do this, which I think is smart. I think more players should be doing this to take some of the power back from clubs. But you can't just afford to say goodbye to that amount of money. I mean, I think PSG should be thinking Mbappe clearly is going to leave at some point. So at the very least, he should leave in a way which works for us. You're never going to convince him, I don't think, to spend his entire career in Paris. It's been very clear for a long time that he has bigger things in his mind. And PSG should just start buying some guys who want to be there and build a culture, actually try and create a club that has a connection with the city, that has opportunities for young players, that has a distinct playing style, and where there's not 1, 2 or 3 people at the top of the club who seem to define the prospects of every manager who comes and joins. It looks like they're going to have a clean break this summer. It looks like Luis Enrique is going to be the guy. Okay, we'll give Luis Enrique like the Mbappe money and say, right, we're going to get Lautaro Martinez, or we're going to do something a little bit different, because it's fairly clear at this point. If you have Verratti and Marquinhos and Messi and Neymar and Mbappe, and you still can't win the Champions League, then
it's maybe not the right tactic.
Maybe that's not going to work, and maybe you should do something else. I mean, it would be great if they could keep Mbappe, but I think that if they keep him this summer, it's actually much more likely that he'll leave on a free next year. And that, I think, is, as much as we say, money doesn't mean anything to them, that's also just a humiliation. I think it makes you look stupid. So sell him to Real Madrid, then leak all the stories about what a prima donna he is behind the scenes, which by all accounts he is, and do something interesting, because I think it's just a little bit disappointing that in like one of the greatest football cities on earth, there's this completely soulless institution that has nothing distinctive about it except for the fact that it's completely in love with big names. I mean, it's just miserable. Like, look at the way that Man City have become a great side. It's by being smart. It's not by just throwing money at everything. We can talk about how much money they spend, but they spend it wisely. Well, PSG have never got the wisely part of it. The adverb has always eluded them. So I don't know. I'm kind of ready for this to end, because every year we talk about Mbappe to Real Madrid, just go to Madrid.
Yeah, there was a really interesting article in The Athletic actually this morning about his mum and the role that she has in his future, whereas it used to be his dad Wilfred who took charge of his affairs. It's now his mum, very fearsome negotiator, sounds like a great businesswoman, and she is very keen on him moving to Real Madrid at some stage. Of course, he'll want to maximise his potential earnings, but I think from a PSG perspective, I don't know, it does feel like a huge loss, like an almost incomprehensible loss to lose Neymar, Messi and Mbappe.
Just on Madrid, Dougie, Flo Perez saying we're not buying any more players. Do you believe that? Or
we talked about it a
after
little bit.
Getting in Joselu?
We talked a little bit about it on Monday Vibes. Yeah, I mean, there was chat that it was a mistranslation. I'm very confused, to be honest, because if that is the case, then I potentially have pulled out of the Bellingham deal. Like, they are quite short in other areas. It's not a very well-rounded squad. Like, they're pretty weak at right back. They only have Joselu as their main striker now. They've lost Benzema. They've lost Mariano Diaz. Like, it's a very weird squad. So I think that must be a mistranslation. But Real Madrid fans, please confirm in the comments, because I was pretty confused. Henry, let's talk about one of your favourites, or at least he went to one of your favourite leagues last year. Mauro Icardi went off to Turkey. This came in from At The Bridge Pod.
I thought you were about to do Odriozola. I don't think I've ever expressed a particular adoration for him.
No.
Yeah, well, Icardi
yeah, great season.
Oh, yeah.
Good time to sell.
23 goals, 26 games for Galatasaray, 30 years old. One of his best seasons in a long time. I loved it by all accounts. I mean, listen, I'm not going to bash the Super League too hard, but he should be scoring goals in there, because Icardi I think he's historically been a pretty good forward, even when...
very good goal scorer.
Even at PSG, when he wasn't really fancied, he was still popping up and getting to double figures every season. The thing about Icardi is it's everything off the pitch that comes with him. It's the big soap drama.
He defines modern day PSG.
In many ways, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's quite remarkable. It's sort of like the upstart. Is it the upstart or the upshot on Twitter?
Yeah, the upshot. Yeah.
Where they do their breakdowns and the crazy things going on. Go and seek their one about Icardi. It's next level. Some of the things that he's been up to. But I think this is a good time to buy him. Although I do think that he's just going to go to Saudi Arabia. In all honesty, this is the kind of move.
Not back to Gala.
Well, the vice president of Galatasaray, he said it. He said, we want him back. We love him back. But the reality is Saudi Arabia. And it's divisions, in my opinion, like the Super League, like the Greek Super League, maybe the MLS. These divisions that are still targeting the odd superstar late in their prime. These are the ones that are really going to suffer from Saudi Arabia.
Or is it a better strategy to not target these old players late in their game?
Arguably, yes. But, I mean, it's not like he's done badly there. And a lot of these players do go. Enner Valencia, he's just left. He's been excellent in that division. Bafatimbi Gomes, he's been brilliant for years over there too. So there's a reason that they go there. They do... Although they are kind of a loss leading enterprise, they do score goals. They're not going to get any resale value. But yeah, I like Icardi. He's obviously not going to play at PSG next season. And now I think if any of these kind of like Saudi clubs, or like you said, Turkish clubs looking at him, now's the time to go for him, because he's got a bit of value in him. You could probably see them getting sort of into the 10 million euros figure for Icardi at this point in time. So yeah, pleased for him. He had a good season. Pleased for Gala. What a great team.
Yeah, I advise anyone to go and have a look at the Turkish Super League top scorers last year. It was fantastic. Enner Valencia at the top, Icardi up there, as we said. Vincent Abubakar was up there. Fabio Borini.
Abubakar went back to Besiktas when they got rid of Wout Weghorst, and he smoked Wout Weghorst for numbers.
Really?
He scored 13 in 6 months. It was wicked.
Fair enough. I wonder where Wout Weghorst will end up next year. Let's talk about the player that Henry briefly mentioned earlier, Alvaro Odriozola. This came in from At The Bridge Pod. Good suggestion. Came through the academy at Real Sociedad, then got that big move to Real Madrid, actually, 30 million euros in 2018. Spent 2 of the last 5 seasons out on loan at Bayern Munich in 2019-20. Did win the treble, but did he really? I mean, he made a handful of appearances. And then at Fiorentina the year before last as well. But last year, barely played at all. Only 36 league minutes for Real Madrid. And at times, Dani Carvajal was really struggling for form as well. So that is really not very good at all. Still a good age, and he has been linked with Juventus. I'm not sure whether he's Juventus calibre for where they want to go, but he probably is Juve calibre right now. They're losing Juan Cuadrado, who's actually in a really down period for Juve over the last few years, probably been one of their better performers. Really, I actually think Juan Cuadrado, fair enough to him, playing out of position as well. But at Fiorentina in his last full season, which we can only really take the statistics from, pretty solid defensively, not bad on the ball, created 1.4 chances created. But if you want a dynamic, dribbler or someone to really progress the balls with the ball at their feet, not really the guy. 0.6 dribbles per 90, only 46% success rate. That's a little bit troubling if you want to move forward and suit the modern game with these flying fullbacks. Yeah, I don't think that's the one for Juve personally, but yeah, good idea for Real Madrid to try and get rid if they can. Pat, let's quickly talk about two Serie A players. I don't know who you want to talk about next. Sergej Milinkovic-Savic is down here. Joaquin Correa is down here. Would you sell either of those?
If you can get a good fee. I mean, Sergej Milinkovic-Savic, I think, has 1 year left on his deal, and we've been talking about this guy for half a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, he's coming off one of his best seasons. I think it was 17 goal involvements in the league, something like that. He is a really strange player in that every year he's done something different. Like there have been seasons where he's been a final third guy, pretty much popping up as a second striker in the way that Dele Alli used to in the Premier League, and getting really high goal and assist numbers. He was kind of touted as a potential successor to Granit Xhaka on the left side of that Arsenal midfield, which you could kind of see playing that role. But at other stages, he's played as a much deeper midfielder, racking up decent defensive numbers and high progressive pass numbers. I think he's 27, 28 now.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are approaching kind of the tipping point into veteran status, but
like all of us.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm long past that point, but it feels like there should be a really good home for Milinkovic-Savic. Like it's kind of strange that I don't want to say wasted, but that he's spent so much of his career at Lazio when, I don't know, it seemed like every Premier League side were interested at one stage. Now, I don't know if there is that home for him this summer. Arsenal look to have kind of closed a deal for their attacking midfield signing. Man United are trying to get Mount. Liverpool have got McAllister. But Chelsea might have a hole.
They need some midfielders.
With Mount going. Failing that, if you're a team who's interested in a Goretzka type, then Milinkovic-Savic could be an interesting alternative to that. I don't really want to see players go to Juventus because it's boring and no one wants to see it. I just want to see Juventus get relegated and dissolved. But yeah, I mean, it feels like he'll probably stay in Italy just because I'm not sure which other big club is looking for him.
Yeah.
Maybe, but they don't have the money. But Barcelona, trying to get Gundogan, you could easily see how Milinkovic-Savic could do that role as well.
Yeah. I think Newcastle, the talk is that they want a more defensive-minded player and an attacking midfielder, probably Szoboszlai or Maddison. I'd rather sign Milinkovic-Savic than Tonali, personally.
Yes,
and then just carry on using Bruno Guimaraes as the sixth. I think that'd be really exciting. I think Milinkovic-Savic is a really, really good player. In the FD office, he's nicknamed the Myth because no one's actually seen him play, first hand in really, really big games. And the likes of George and Joe, who like to criticise Serie A, don't really believe in his abilities. But I think it's very rude. I agree with Pat. I think he's got a lot to his game. He's got the physical profile of Tonali, but not Tonali, Fellaini, but with much, much better technical attributes. I really like him. Finally, Henry, Joaquin Correa came in from Q Calamity. If Inter are losing Dzeko, looks like he's going to Fenerbahce, surely they've got to keep Joaquin Correa around. I'm not sure about this suggestion.
I completely agree. If there's no guarantee Lukaku's going to return, because I think you can't just take on loan again. And until it's obvious who you're going to go out and sign, then keep Correa around. I mean, they spent 27 million euros on him.
Is it that much?
When they bought him in, yeah. So it was quite a bizarre investment in many ways. He hasn't had a great season, although largely a bench option. I think since the turn of the year, he's only scored once, and he has played minutes. But before that, he'd got like 6 goal involvements by October. So he was really going well. When the early period when Lukaku was injured and he was playing more consistently, scoring and assisting alongside Martinez and Dzeko, but yeah, he's dropped off really. He was never really going to get into that side with 4 big strikers in the team, but I still think he's useful. He's amazing hold-up play. He's really good with his back to the goal, and if you're looking for someone to essentially sort of assist Lautaro Martinez, I think Correa can do a good job. Both Argentine get on well. I mean, I don't know if they get on well. I'm assuming they do. I think I like him, and I think you're seeing interest from the likes of Everton at the moment. I don't know if that's strong enough to convince him to leave. I think if I was Inter Milan, I would be looking to hold on to Joaquin Correa because you can get more out of him if you use him in the right way.
Fair enough. Yeah, that reminded me of you saying that he was having limited minutes. It reminded me of this analogy that I heard from Jack Clark, who plays for Sunderland, the other day, who was being interviewed, and he was like, people underestimate how difficult it is to jump in and out of a side. He was like, it's like driving a car when you've passed your test. You know how to do it, but if you haven't done it for ages, it feels really uncomfortable when you first do it. And jumping into a football match in a scenario that you haven't been playing week in, week out, it's almost the same. I thought that was a really interesting analogy. Anyway, I keep Joaquin Correa as well. Guys, what do you make of our suggestions of players your club needs to sell this summer? Let us know in the comments down below. And let's move on to some quickfire questions. Okay, we're not really doing quickfire questions having said that this week. We're actually going to talk about some managerial movement. I mean, Pat Marcelino has gone to Marseille. That feels quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think Marseille have done some interesting stuff with their managerial recruitment over the last few years, and actually their recruitment on the pitch as well. When Sampaoli went there, I really liked that. I really like Marcelino. I mean, completely different style. I suppose pressing is a part of it. But this is a guy who generally plays 4-4-2, who gets pretty good numbers out of his forwards. Midfielders tend to shine a little bit less, I suppose, just because that's kind of the nature of 4-4-2. But he's been successful everywhere he's gone. I don't really think there are too many blots on his career overall. Often he's left clubs because promises to him have been broken. He's fallen out with guys behind the scenes. But he's... Again, like, he just overperforms, and so many players, like the Gonzalo Guedes type, like those guys who you're like, oh, they seem talented, and then they have like terrible careers. Almost always, you look at them, and their best career was under Marcelino. I just think he's a really smart manager. I find it insane he's been out of work for so long. I think that if he'd come out and said something like, I'm learning English, I do think that a Premier League club would have picked him up long ago, but they're naturally conservative and scared of things that they don't understand, like other languages. So I think I don't want to say he could get a bigger job, because Marseille are one of Europe's historic clubs, but it's weird to me that that's where he's ended up. I think he should have been able to write his own ticket at some stage.
The only concern is, as always, Marseille, just Sampaoli got fed up after a year, claiming they weren't going to back him. We saw Villas-Boas sort of quit in sensational fashion. Igor Tudor...
Well, to be fair, there was a riot.
Well, even,
Bielsa
too.
Tudor left after a year.
Tudor just come out saying he's only there for 1 year, but it was like managing two clubs because it's such a heavy weight of responsibility there. So it's clearly not the easiest place to be a manager. I mean, Marseille is a weird and wonderful city, isn't it? And the fan base passionate too. So yeah, and he had as we said, Marcelino had a difficult experience at Valencia. I guess if you've managed at Valencia, there's a good chance you can manage at Marseille at this point in terms of
chaos factor.
Yeah, chaos. So yeah, I'm super excited. I'm sad that Gallardo, the deal didn't go through, because I'm excited to see what Gallardo could do on European shores. However, I think Marcelino is a stunning hire.
It's a bit weird, the Gallardo thing. He's been talked about for, it feels like about 2-3 years for a move to Europe. I don't really know what's going on in those job interviews. Maybe he's not getting them. I'm not sure. The other managerial appointment we wanted to talk about was Rudy Garcia to Napoli. Again, managed Marseille in the past. Did actually quite a good job with Lyon. Got them to the Champions League semi-finals in that weird year where it was one-leg knockouts. Beat Man City, of course. But he's been managing in Saudi Arabia. He's taking over a side that has just won the Scudetto for the first time in 33 years, that has lost Kim Min-jae, looking likely, might well lose Osman, although feels like that's less and less likely by the week because of the price that De Laurentiis wants for him. I think that's a really, really difficult job at Napoli, to be honest, and I'm not sure whether he's got the credentials at this moment in his career to improve them or maintain their level. It probably won't be a disaster. I think they'll probably still finish in the top 4. But in terms of an inspiring appointment, not the one for me. Henry, you wanted to talk about whether Germany should fire Hansi Flick. I actually haven't seen much chat about this. Results have not been good?
No, not at all. I mean, it was on the contrary, on Twitter, I think the German fans are pretty fed up with him. Bild have said, like, it would be negligent not to fire him at this point. They're that fed up. I mean, 3 wins in their last 11. They just drew 1-1 with Poland. Blaszczykowski got a great little send-off in that game. They gave him the whole...
Is he still playing for Poland?
Yeah.
My days.
He must be like 37, 38.
They gave him a big goodbye, and a lot of the German players knew him from their time in Dortmund as well, so it's quite cool. But anyway, yeah, Flick, and then they've just lost 2-0 at home to Colombia. Once again, Juan Cuadrado had a great game in that. And I think people they were so disappointing at the World Cup. And some of his decisions, apparently the fact that he's gone to a back three just clearly isn't working. The fact that he continues to play a false nine, and I think people like Füllkrug, they keep going, just play Füllkrug. Although he's not a superstar name, at least he can score goals.
Yeah.
Like, he's scored tons in the Bundesliga last season. They're like, just play him. You know what I mean? There's enough good German players around him to make that work. And I just think, I don't know, it's a bit self-sabotage at this moment in time. I think the second there's a whiff that Jurgen Klopp is available, Germany will go for him. Because at this point, this Hansi Flick project isn't working out. This Germany team is one of the most underperforming teams, full stop. Because they should not be as bad as they are. And yet they just seem to be limping through games and not getting results where it matters. And yeah, drawing a Poland and losing to Colombia is not a good mark when both the games are at home.
Interesting. I mean, talking about Klopp, Pat, if Liverpool are as bad for as long as they were last season, next season, say they're in sort of mid-table up until March, is there any world that you think Klopp could be under pressure?
Yeah, he'll be under pressure if it's another season like that after a bit of investment, because the whole thing, well, I don't know if this was the feeling among Liverpool fans, but certainly my feeling was that part of the issue was the lack of legs in midfield. I would actually say that was most of the issue. You know, like the press in the attack was less coordinated in the absence of Mane and Firmino being a year older and Jota being injured and blah, 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 blah. When that press falls apart and when the midfield doesn't have the legs to cover, suddenly you're having defenders who have to defend all the time. And Jamie Carragher was right on the money when he said a guy like Trent Alexander-Arnold is amazing when you have the ball, but a bit of a liability when you don't. Well, I think that actually goes for a lot of defenders at the highest level. Generally speaking, really good teams have their defenders defend very little. You don't. If attackers are running at your defender all game long, that defender will make mistakes. It doesn't matter if they're Maldini; they will make mistakes. So, yeah, I mean, like if they get in midfield reinforcements and they're still this bad, then I think he will be under a bit of pressure, but mostly from himself. I think it would potentially take him walking for them to get rid of him, because firstly, I think the managerial market at that level is not particularly flush at the moment. But he was the one who left Dortmund. He was the one who said, I'm not happy with my performance, I'm going to leave. So I could imagine if they have another bad year, maybe Klopp says, nah, I will think about what's next, but I don't know, is what's next Germany? Like, maybe.
Yeah, I think he'll probably want to manage Real Madrid one day before taking the Germany job. That always just feels like his dream destination, at least in my head, in terms of his style. The one thing about Klopp that annoyed me last season was the previous summer we'd been like, I think they look really light in midfield. And everyone had said, I think they look really light in midfield. And he was like, no, we're fine in midfield. And then 2 months into the season, he was like, I think I made a mistake. And you're like, you can't be in that role with your advisors and make that sort of mistake. And yes, there was financial issues involved, but they should have had more backups to Tchouaméni, and they didn't do it. And it really cost them last season. In the end, finishing 5th was a pretty remarkable turnaround, but I don't think that was really down to him too much, although he did slightly fix the system in the end. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Klopp's future next season, if they're as bad as they were last year. I mean, they could, instantly go back to sort of 2nd or 3rd next year and we look like idiots. Anyway, guys, that's all we've got time for on Continental Club for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. If they have and they want to watch more Football Daily content, Henry, what would you recommend?
Not even Football Daily content. If you want to watch us three, because that's all you're getting this week. We've got Monday Vibes. That is
Sunday Vibes coming.
Yes. We've got Sunday Vibes. We're on Monday Vibes. I think we've written everything and done all the voices this week. So yeah, just check out. It's the Henry, Pat and Dougie Daily at the moment. So
it's a great daily.
Dougie Daily is really good.
Plus the people behind the camera, I should add, they are also
the little people, the below the line people.
James Wayne behind the camera, Has Kareem doing some of the edits. Massive teamwork. It's been 5-man team this week. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on Sunday Vibes in a few days' time. Bye bye.